Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the fourth session in the 6 Weeks to Flexible Work and Life Success series. I'm Callie Williams-Yost, and this series is part of an ongoing effort to bring leaders, teams, individuals, and all the people in our personal lives together to reimagine work and life, not only to get through this COVID-19 crisis, but come out the other side ready to thrive. This is so in particularly important today and as part of this broader 6-week series, because what we're seeing around the country is a lot of the social distancing restrictions are lifting. And we're starting to really talk about what this next phase of the pandemic is going to look like in terms of where we work, how we work, and manage our lives. So we have to make sure that we are being creative and we're looking at all the flexible options. I'm very excited to say that today an op-ed I wrote was posted in USA Today talking just about this. So this is perfect timing. And today we are going to talk about boundaries and intention, but not perfection, which is a key part of the implementation of a flexible work strategy. But before we do, I want to introduce my producer, Lauren, who will be with me today. Hello,
Hello,
Lauren.
everybody.
Today, we are going to talk about boundaries and intention and not perfection. And what I want you to do before I start with the presentation, I want you to just think as we go along about a tweak that was part of your quarantine daily routine last week that you got done. How did it make you feel? I want to know what the tweak was, but I also want to know how did it make you feel? And at the end, I want to see how many people put things in the chat, and we'll pull a couple out to share, and then we will download any others that were shared and put it in a PDF for everybody to see. So again, boundaries and intention, but not perfection. This is really important, an important concept to hold on to, because it's a struggle. In this new normal where there really are no boundaries, how do you work with all the people, all of the aspects of that shared leadership model that we talked about on Tuesday, to keep it simple, to start with where you are, again, to really hold on to the fact that this is about just giving it your best shot, being intentional about what you're trying to do, but not trying to be perfect, prioritizing, communicating, and recalibrating, and then leveraging that learning to ultimately create a flexible work strategy that is based on that foundation of shared leadership, where you as an individual are coordinating with your team, with your manager, again, with the people in your personal life, so that you are actively leveraging with strategic intention the work flexibility, technology, and workspace options on and off site. Right now it's off site, remote for a lot of people, but it's getting ready to go to a hybrid remote and on site model where you're going to possibly be working remote, but then also there'll be more adapted flexible workspaces that we will possibly be going to soon. And you're doing that with strategic coordinated intentions so you can do your job, manage your life, run your businesses, and reboot the momentum of our economy. And that will require setting boundaries, being super intentional, and again, being open to experimentation and innovation, which inevitably is not going to be perfect all the time. So what we want to remember is that the ultimate goal is we're leveraging the infrastructure that is available to us in order to be able to accomplish what it is we want to on and off the job. And when it comes to boundaries and in being intentional about that, it really does matter, because there is this new work and life reality that we're all dealing with. And boundaries were a problem for a long time. This is not a new issue, but again, the crisis essentially has made this just real. It has gotten rid of any artificial boundary that used to exist between work and life. The clocks and walls have disappeared, and now we're really forced to figure out how do we figure out how to get everything done? I'm hearing a lot of people say who have never worked remotely, they don't know when to stop work, they don't know when to begin, they don't know when to go for a walk, they don't know when to eat, they're struggling with sleep. I mean, the boundaries really are no longer there, and we have to put something else in place. So we're going to talk today about the fact that when things become more extreme and disorienting in terms of how your work and life has been disrupted, My rule of thumb that I have found is this is a good time when you want to even be more intentional and specific about your priorities. And what that looks like is, here's a good example of what that could look like. I saw this on Instagram. I'm actually a big Pink fan. I think she's great. And she put this on Instagram a couple weeks ago. This would be a schedule that she and her daughter put together in order to figure out how to put structure around when they were working, learning, doing school, and getting all the other things that they needed to get done as a family, part of their routine. And so what struck me about this, and she actually credited her daughter for doing this, which I thought was interesting, but what struck me is that it turns out I think that Pink and her daughter are work-life fit naturals. And I mentioned them last week on Thursday as inspiring Tweak It, and actually ultimately somewhat inspiring the quarantine daily routine tool that I put together. That's adapted, simplified for the purpose of this series. But what I learned, I want to dive a little bit deeper into what I learned from them in terms of how do you set boundaries? How are you intentional so that you can try to get what matters done and prioritized in a way that isn't overwhelming, but just ultimately leads you to success that feels good. Um, Here are basically a high level synopsis of what those secrets were. The first was clarify expectations. So what you're going to begin to see is how this feeds into the shared leadership model that we introduced on Tuesday. Clarify expectations. This is where it's important to talk to your manager, right? Understand what is expected of me. And as you as a manager, making sure people understand what those expectations are, because then once you know what your expectations are, and also not just at work, but your expectations in your personal life, as a parent, as a partner, what are for yourself. You begin to clarify those expectations, and then you can start to narrow down your priorities and plan from there. And that's when you begin to, from those priorities, start to ask yourself, when am I going to do it? Where am I going to do it? How am I going to do it? And that's the intention. So clarify priorities, determine where, when, where, and how, and that's when you start to put the intention down. And then you also talk about with whom. So that's where you begin to coordinate with the people in your personal life, but also your team. And they also taught me about the power of a combined calendar, being flexible, and celebrating success. And we're going to go over all of these for the next few minutes. So let's first go back to the quarantine daily routine. And hopefully now you can see that tool was to get you started, was to get you to begin to see how to be intentional, how to put those boundaries in place. Because when you clarify expectations, when you identify priorities, and when you determine when, where, and how, you put a stake in the ground. You have put structure in your day. And I learned this from the naturals because it's just something they intuitively do. And I will confess, I started studying them for two reasons. One, because I needed to understand how this 15 to 20% of the people who I would meet in organizations who were mystified why I was there, like could not understand why this was a big deal. They were just able to fit it all together and flexibly, switch around what they were doing when. They did not feel the need to be trained. But most of the people they work with did not have a clue, and that included me. So much of my research was to try to help me, because at the time, as I do now, but then I owned my own company, I was in charge of my own time, but I had an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old and a husband, and was trying to take care of myself. And I have to say, honestly, I wasn't doing a great job. And I found them very inspiring, these naturals. So I wanted to learn from them for myself. So their secrets in terms of putting boundaries and intention around what it is they were trying to do were, again, super simple. I was surprised, but it helped me understand that I could be the one to put that structure in place if it wasn't there for me. And it's interesting for those who want to know the research behind this. There's actually academic research behind what they do. But it's studied in two different schools, but it's actually the naturals are doing these two things together. It's called boundary tactic management and resource allocation theory. And they're obviously managing their micro boundaries and allocating their resources. But what they're also doing is they're coordinating with others. And this is where you can see from the shared leadership model where the coordination with your team and with your manager comes into play, but then also in your personal life, being thoughtful about who am I trying to work with to get this done. And now I'm going to talk about the combined calendar, the power of the combined calendar. I have to also confess, when I learned about this, I did not keep a combined calendar. But what the naturals taught me was once you determine what your priorities are and think through where, when, and how you're going to do it and with whom, when you put it on your calendar, that is even a stronger stake in the ground that this is a boundary, this is what I am doing. And if it's on your calendar, it is even a greater chance of happening. So that's when you look at Pink's list and you see that all that laid out, imagining that is on a calendar somewhere. That is more likely to happen because you're looking at your phone, you're looking at your desk, you can see something that you've committed to. And there are many ways to keep a combined calendar. Many naturals keep their calendar on their Outlook. They have their personal calendar and their work calendars, two separate but showing together. They've figured out a way to make the personal calendar private. Some are not comfortable with that. Others have their Outlook calendar up and then their Google calendar on another page that they're toggling between. They have their Outlook calendar up, but then they have a personal paper calendar out in front. There are many ways to do it. The point is they're always toggling between the two. And that calendar, that's going back to the rule of thumb, the more disruptive the situation is in your work and your life, I have found, and the naturals taught me, to be even more granular and specific about the priorities that you're trying to do. That's why when we did the 3 work and 3 personal tweaks from last week, that's not the sum total of everything you're doing. That was just to get you started with things that were particularly important for you or that you were struggling to make happen. But again, you can take this as far and as deep as you want to in order to make sure you have the structure and intention that you need. Next, so I'll tell you, I added my tweaks from last week to my calendar. Okay, so I added this column to the tool. So if next week, as you look at the week to come, make sure at the end, once you picked your tweaks, you write down that you've put it in your calendar and start to get into that routine. And you'll see that it does make a difference because it pops up. You get a reminder, you see it on your calendar. Oh, I'm committed to doing that. Then you have to make a choice. They also taught me to be flexible. So this is where it gets interesting. I tend to be sort of type A. So if I put it in my calendar, I better make it happen. Okay, well, that doesn't always happen and you have to be flexible with that. So for example, last week, what I planned for my tweaks the prior week, this one did not happen. It did not happen because my op-ed needed to be finally edited and submitted for publication to USA Today. And I had to reschedule this meeting to next week. That's okay. Something else came up, another priority came up that was really amazing and super exciting. And you know what? That's fine. This training will get reviewed next week. I coordinated with my instructional designer. It's all good. I'm trying to be flexible. My exercise, I know I shared with all of you, this has been a real bugaboo for me. I have not been able to figure out how to get the exercise in. And I had committed to Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 a.m. Well, you know what? I ended up grabbing a slot on Sunday. I did not work out Monday. I ended up grabbing a slot on Tuesday because I knew Wednesday was going to be super busy because of the op-ed. And I'm going to try to do Friday. But I was I had committed to 3 times, but I was flexible in when exactly I was able to do it. And finally, celebrating success. This is my favorite secret of the Work-Life Fit Naturals that I learned by far. Okay, going to that one tweak did not happen, the reviewing with my instructional designer. Old me, old Callie, before the tweak at practice would have really been upset and been like, you know what, forget it. Why am I even doing this? You know, I can't make it happen. I'd be too intense about making sure every single thing happened the way I wanted to. When I talk to the naturals, and let's say I didn't exercise, I only exercised once this week. And I would say to the naturals, like, oh, I only exercised once. And a natural would say, you exercised once, that's great. They celebrate success. They are always giving themselves credit for what they did get done, and for what they didn't get done, they were willing to say, hey, what could I do differently? How could we make it happen in another way? and they move on and they do it again and again and again. And what I realized is that it wasn't so much getting every single thing done. It was a matter of being as intentional as you could, putting the boundaries up where you could, doing the best you can. And over time, you ultimately do get to everything that it is that you're trying to do. Maybe not perfectly, but you are more likely to get there than if you didn't do this at all. And it's something I hold on to this day, and I do regularly. So as you can see, I did get these things done. I revised my op-ed, and I was able to get the article that I wanted to get teed up for my newsletter, teed up for today, that I'm going to send out after this session's over. So I did that. I did interview the leader that we are launching the project with, and I did do my flowers by my bed, and you saw I bought my screen, and I did exercise, not exactly the way I wanted, but I did do it. So I celebrated success, and I'm going to guarantee that Pink did not, if she put all these in her calendar, it is not happening exactly the way she wanted it to, but at least there are boundaries and intention, not perfection, around what she's trying to accomplish in this reality where the boundaries are not clear and it's very disruptive. So here's my quarantine daily routine, flowers by my bed. I put it on my Instagram, the Work Life Fit Instagram, and I put it on Twitter. And I really would love it if, for going forward, as we are together for these next few weeks, each week I'm going to put a tweak up I'm doing, and I'd love for you to do the same. So with that, I want to celebrate your success. How many people did a tweak? Is there anybody that wants to share? Lauren?
Okay, we're waiting for people to enter. If anybody's put a tweak, they haven't put anything in the chat yet, so we'll give people a second to type in their one tweak that they want to share.
Well, I will tell you, for me, I have now been doing this version, the Tweak It practice, or the version, another version of the quarantine daily routine now for probably, I would say, 8 years now. And I do find that the more intentional and specific that I can be about what it is I'm trying to get done and put it on my calendar and just continue to prioritize and be good to myself, not put too much on there, but just, again, do my best. It does get done, and you really can put that structure around what you're trying to do and do it in a way that collaborates with the other people in your life and also helps you stay connected to what you're trying to, your priorities and your expectations in all the parts of your life. Do we have one?
Sure. Lauren says she put together a family photo album for last year.
Oh, that's very good. Okay, so this brings up an interesting tweak that I'm hearing from people. I am hearing people call it their quarantine white space. And it's something I talked about in the HBR article that I wrote, which was interesting. They've interpreted it personally, that they are using the white space not just to get work done that needed to get done, but they're using that white space to do personal things that they've always wanted to get done. So I have heard one person shared with me that she always wanted to play a piece of music, a very complicated piece of music with her quartet. And she has this quartet that plays at her church. And so she is practicing her her violin section of this piece of music at home, and then she is sending it over via YouTube to her people in her quartet. They are doing their part, and then they pull together the videos and they see how it's all lining up and how they're doing, and they're practicing this way. And their goal is when they're able to go to church again, is they are going to perform their quarantine quartet piece to the entire church, which I thought was very interesting. Another person talked to me about how they'd always wanted to photograph birds. This person lives in New York, and they said the park was always so busy and they never really felt like they could comfortably go and just quietly photograph birds in the park. Well, there's really there aren't a lot of people in the park right now. And so they go up to the park and they walk around and they photograph birds in the park. And they've said it's amazing how many birds are in the park. And so people are being creative, like the photo album, to say, how am I using this time and how am I going to come out the other side? There was somebody who did share on social media, on Twitter, that they were running. They did a run and they had a little picture of their running shoes, which was great. So again, just keep tweaking this, just keep doing your quarantine daily routine, and you will see that those boundaries and that intention does happen, but not perfectly. And that is what's so important. So again, remember the secrets of the Work-Life Fit Naturals as you try to continue to find those boundaries, set that intention about what you're trying to get done. It's about clarifying expectations, identifying your priorities, determining when, where, and how, and with whom, combining that calendar, having combined work and personal calendar, being flexible, and then being sure to celebrate success, especially right now, where I am finding just getting to the grocery store and getting in and out of there and getting the groceries put away in 2 hours is really amazing. And remembering my mask and remembering my gloves and remembering my Santa, I mean, it's a lot. So again, be good to yourself. And I hope you will join me next week because it's going to be a really interesting week. First of all, I am going to be sharing an interview that I am recording with Whitney Johnson. We're launching the Leadership Insights part of the Reimagining Work and Life effort. And this is a series that we're calling Beyond the Crisis, Leading a Resilient and Flexible Organization. And Whitney is an expert in personal disruption. And why I love her work is that her disruption model, the S-curve of learning, really puts an amazing context around how we're experiencing what's going on right now. This period where we all have been thrown into the flexible and remote work deep end, and we're now trying to reimagine what the next phase is. And I think there is this tendency to want to go back to what we knew, the way we worked before. So in other words, if you looked at her curve model, we were thrown onto another curve with flexible and remote work with the crisis. Now that we're sort of looking at the next phase, there's this tendency to want to go back to the old curve when really that is probably not a good idea. It's not only are we not there yet, and you're not going to be able to have the same number of people necessarily in the workplace. People aren't going to be comfortable necessarily going in. It could put people expose them unnecessarily to getting sick. And it isn't actually setting your organization up for what's possibly going to be a next phase of the crisis in the winter. So how do you use that S-curve of learning model to stay on this new curve and continue to reimagine work and get better and smarter? And that's what we're going to talk to Whitney about. And her work is really informative. So I will be sharing that on social media next week. So do look for it. And I'll also put it on the page, the COVID-19 page on our site. Then Tuesday, on the 5th, we are going to talk about 2 huge mindset shifts that have to happen if you are going to implement a strategic approach to flexible work in this crisis and beyond. It's understanding that work is a what, it is not a where, and that flexibility isn't necessarily fair. And we're going to talk about what that looks like and how to make that part of the culture shift that you're trying to make. And then on Thursday, we're going to dive even deeper into the habits and moments of physical, mental, and emotional well-being. So now that we have the whole quarantine daily routine set up, the tool, we're going to dive into what specifically can we be doing in terms of habits, but also the key moments that help us be our physical, mental, and emotional best. And I'm going to share with you my routine that I do and have been doing probably now for 20 years that helps me. And I hope you will share yours as well. So, any questions before we wrap up for this session for today? Do we have any questions, Lauren?
No questions at this point.
All right, so great. Well, let me just, before we go, I got to go back to Rosie because she is right now just a hugely important symbol to me. This is not an easy period. And as I suspected, as we started to loosen some of these stay-at-home mandates and begin to think to get beyond some of the official social distancing requirements, there is going to be this period where we're going to grapple with what's next. And there's going to be a real tendency to want to just sort of go back quickly to what was, even if it might not be the right thing, because this is hard. We've got to stay in this sort of in between phase where we're learning these new ways of operating and getting better at it and getting smarter at it, and now creating a next hybrid version of remote and flexible workplaces and what that looks like and what it means for us in terms of that culture piece, how we are communicating with each other, coordinating, planning, and executing, but also pulling together the infrastructure of flexibility, technology, workspace, and the flexibility that goes along with that, and pulling those two together. This is new for a lot of people, but I know we can do it. And so just every time you think, I can't do this, just remember Rosie Nan. She figured it out, and we can too. So with that, please do join me next week. It's going to be a great one. We're going to go even deeper into these concepts, even deeper into the flexible work culture piece, and also into the personal, how we can be part of that shared leadership model and bring our best to the table and not only survive, but thrive. So again,
Hey,
thank you.
Callie,
Yeah.
real quick, we have a question. Could
Oh,
you
yeah.
share again where the tools you shared can be viewed? I believe you
Yes.
shared at the top of the call while I was joining.
Well, everything is going to be on the Flex Strategy Group page at the /COVID-19 page. If you go to the main Flex Strategy Group page and you just click on the top, there's a red bar on the top. It takes you right to that page. Each week, we will archive everything. We will archive the video, we will archive the tools, we will archive the highlights. So each week you'll see it'll build. And I'll also put the interviews with the leaders, the leader insight interviews there as well. So that's Flex Strategy Group /COVID-19, or you can just go to the main page and go to the red bar at the top.
Callie, could you just clarify that all of the recordings can be found there?
They will. We have to upload them to that page. We do it at the end of each week. If you're anxious to get to the recordings beforehand, we try to get the recordings up on YouTube probably by the end of today, if not first thing tomorrow morning. So you'll always find them there as well.
The previous ones are there now.
Yes, they should be. They should be there. Yes,
Yep.
they should. And if there's any problems, I mean, remember, we're doing this from intention, not perfection. We are living the principles with this series because we feel it is just way more important that we get this information out there than to make sure we have every single thing organized and figured out before we go forward. So if there is anything you're noticing that doesn't look like how we're intending it, please give us feedback, because we are, again, living the principles. We are communicating, we are recalibrating, and we are leveraging the learning, and we welcome you into that conversation. So please let us know. But right now, they should be all up on YouTube. And I ask one final thing. If you could please just go to social media where I'm sharing this op-ed that I wrote today at USA Today. It is important that we keep flexible work front and center in terms of this next phase. And I'm nervous, I'm concerned that we're losing focus on that, especially since it is the only piece of the puzzle that needed to be in place before we were to go back to work. It's the only one. We don't have the testing yet, and we don't have a vaccine or really solid therapeutics. We really just have this flexible work aspect. And so please share it so that we just keep that front and center, and we keep being creative and reimagining work and life through this crisis. So with that, thank you very much. I really appreciate you joining me, and I hope I see you next week. We continue this conversation. In the meantime, stay safe and keep reimagining work and life. Thank you.